It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we have another hodgepodge episode, but the bulk of it focuses in on the UFC. So for all of you out there, we do have a bit of a kernel plan here, and everything just kind of spun out around it. But anyways, y'all know what I'm going to say right now. I'm going to say please subscribe, because if you don't have access to the bonus content. We typically divide up our episodes where there's a free section and a bonus section. So if you're new here, you should probably subscribe if you want the whole show. Now, let's check in with John and see how he's been doing, because he is back home in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm in Minnesota visiting my mom. So, going to be here for probably the whole month of April. Yes, April. Coming up next month, April. I'll be here the whole month. So it's really going to be exciting. Just exciting stuff happening at the Nash household here. No, it'll be good. I'll see my girlfriend's in town, so it will, it shouldn't be so bad. I'll play some bingo. I'll give some live updates from bingo night.
I think bingo's kind of cool, though.
Listen, it's those people are cutthroat. There's no, if you can't screw up and call bingo and not a bingo. You'll get a bunch of dirty looks.
Oh no. That's funny. So let's dive into this episode we have prepped here, because you sent me some good clips from this Terrence Crawford interview where he went on Kamaru Usman's podcast and they discussed UFC pay. Now I'm going to ask this first question here, and it's a doozy. John, what were some of the points that made you go, what? That doesn't sound quite right.
Yeah, I mean, isn't Henry Cejudo's a co-host of that, right?
Yes.
Is it just for So that's him and Usman working together. And I got to tell you, I've never watched that show, but I'm impressed. The show is an amazing amount, is amazing, I guess I should say, for the amount of misuse of idioms in the show. I'm not one to talk. If you listen to our show enough, I'm Mr. Malaprop. I'll use the wrong word often. I'll slip in and I have to go correct myself, but they take it to another level, right? And especially Henry, because there's a moment, someone tweeted this, I thought it was hilarious, where he actually used the term double-edged sword wrong, but that he was even though he got it right, the proper use of it, what he was thinking was wrong, and he was trying to use it in the wrong way, and he just lucked out to use it the right way. So the whole thing is pretty amazing. So I was impressed with that. The show is entertaining for that value alone. All of them engage in it. The constant malaprops by all three of them. The guest Crawford as well. So that was amazing. But besides that, when we get to the gist of their conversation about MMA and boxing pay, which is, I guess we're probably the person that people to talk to about this, because we look at this so much more than everybody else.
That's true.
And more detail than everybody else. And they engage in many of the common tropes that are the common mistaken ideas that people have about boxing and MMA pay. But they had a lot of stuff right. And Crawford was generally very accurate, actually, in correcting them. And they were both right, Usman and Crawford, in the idea that the top boxers make more. That's common knowledge. It's an assumption, and it's generally true. There are almost no fighters making 8 figures in MMA, the very top. We can almost name them all. Conor McGregor, for several bouts, has made 8 figures. Khabib made about 10 million exactly, or a little over 10 million for his last 2 fights. John Jones, for his last fight, apparently made over 10 million. Francis Ngannou is close to that, around 10 million for MMA right now. That's it. There's no other MMA fighters have done that. And you're talking every year in boxing. I mean, the last few years, there's about a dozen boxers or more making an 8-figure purse, including Francis Ngannou last year for his last 2 years for boxing. So he's done that in boxing, but hasn't done that in MMA. So the top guys, they got that right. Crawford was also right when he said that overall boxers make more. And this is a thing a lot of people get wrong. but he's correct. Boxers make more overall. The lower tier boxers make more. And he brought up the fact that there's, signing bonuses for guys coming out of the Olympics. And Usman said that's an unfair comparison. Well, it's not really, because there's a minor league, amateur system for boxing. We have that in MMA. It's called, collegiate and Olympic wrestling. It's called collegiate and Olympic judo. There's amateurs that translate to MMA, but very few people, these big prospects, are getting big signing bonuses, right? And, I'm sure we might talk about it later. A particular kickboxer, the UFC was unwilling to break their model for. So MMA does not do that same thing where these guys are getting huge paydays, not huge, but for MMA versions, I guess lower tier, big signing bonuses and monthly payments to keep them afloat, just to be in boxing like you see boxers get. So he's right about that. And then there's also later, Henry Cejudo brought up how the UFC can exercise more control. He said as a positive, but he was right about that as well. That the UFC can force fights, can do stuff that they can't do in boxing. So they got those parts right.
Okay, let me ask you this. Last week, we spoke about the very bottom tier. Would you mind just reiterating really quick that even at the bottom, where most people think MMA makes more, that's not always the case?
Yeah, I mean, the problem mistake they make is they talk about the UFC fighters. But if you look at, there's 27,000 plus people, professional boxers every year engaging in boxing. And there's something like 10,000 MMA fighters every year. So you're talking about vast numbers of people. And so they talked about, the prelim fighters in the UFC card make more. Well, that's, there's 500 different UFC fighters fight every year. There's 700 in a contract, but not all of them fight in a given year. There's like 550 different fighters every year in the UFC compete. So you're talking about the narrow sliver of the very top of MMA for the UFC. So when several years ago, back when it was easier to get the commission reports for payouts, I went to I think it was 15 different states, and I got every payout sheet for a year from all the different states. We're talking several thousand purses. Now, this doesn't include the non-reported stuff, but usually that covers just the top fighters that you don't see the full purse or the vast majority of the purse paid. So we had an idea, at least of, the vast majority of fighters, what they're kind of getting paid. And I put it out as a percentile, just like a pay percentile, and compared boxing to MMA. And if you look at it, the top guys, obviously in boxing, the reported paid, not even the what we know about purses, just the reported purses. So it doesn't include a lot of the pay-per-view bonuses, the back end stuff. Boxers made multiples at the top, but at the very bottom, is impossible to kind of tell, because there's several people that have made zero purses, which technically you should make as a professional. And some of those zero purses are misleading because those guys were getting percentage of the gate or whatever. But after that, you'd see that boxers at the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 percentile, all the way up to about 85% would make more. I think the medium purse for a boxer was around $3,000 per bout, where the medium for an MMA fighters, actually I thought it was $2,500, I think, per bout for boxers, and about $1,200 to $1,500 for MMA, give or take. I can't remember. There's very different ways I did it, where I weighted it and I didn't weigh it. But the point is that boxers made a noticeable more amount at the median, and there's several reasons, because they have more leverage. That there's promoters would often pay journeymen more to build a guy up, something that doesn't happen in MMA much, or even managers would pay them to give their guy an opponent, something you don't see much in MMA. There's a purse minimum in some states per round, and because boxers have a 4-round minimum instead of 3, that means the bottom guys make more. But in America, North America at the time, and in the United States, where all the states that released their reports, you'd see that boxers, on average, at the bottom, made more. And what confuses people is they look at a UFC or MMA card, and they look at the bottom there making more than they see at the bottom of another purse for a top rank card or Golden Boy, and say, oh, MMA pays more because the UFC or PFL pays more with these bottom guys. But forget that there are something like 150 major promotion boxing events held around the world, where there's 40 UFC and another 18 or so PFL this year. Much less MMA promotions are holding events at the high level, just a few promoters. And so there's a smaller pool of fighters making those up, where across the board at the top on the main card of these boxing cards, they are making a lot more. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion is. And if you look at our last episode, or the episode before, I can't remember exactly, we embedded a graph with the information on this. If you want to look it up, you can look it up in that episode.
Yep, 2 episodes back. Just for those out there that are wanting to check it out, it's the episode before our last one. Now, you mentioned it, so we're going to go ahead and bring it up. Dana White Contender Series winner Artem Vakatov says that UFC is no longer in his immediate plans after a contract dispute. Apparently, the UFC wanted to put him on that 10K Contender Series contract. Now, a word of note, this guy is widely considered to be the best kickboxer around right now. And when Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira came in, they didn't have to come in on those contracts. So, John, I need to know what you make of this whole dispute, because it seems pretty intense right now.
Well, I mean, one, I guess I can make of it is the UFC doesn't feel they need him. Perhaps they don't want him because he is not, unlike Alex Pereira, or Israel. He has star-making power in a region they wanted to build in, New Zealand and Australia, right? Alex Pereira, Brazil is still a very valuable territory. Also, the potential rivalry between those two, it seemed possible they could hook them up in a fight, so it was probably worth the gamble to offer Alex Pereira more than they normally would. So that's that. So you got to look at where he's from and which region of the world. UFC might be thinking, we have too many former, Eastern Bloc fighters dominating the UFC right now. Mm-hmm. And so maybe we don't want to pay more for that. That's one. The other thing is UFC does seem to be going to a shift where they are not interested in bringing up as much outside talent as they did before. And maybe it's because they want to maximize their profits even more. But it does seem like they are beholden more to their formulaic pay model of going through the Contender Series, taking what you get, and then we'll build on from there. But we are not breaking the mold like we used to. We're not paying like we did, when we offered Eddie Alvarez much more than anybody else to come back to the UFC, or Hector Lombard got a big signing bonus, or actually signing, but it was a side letter. I think paid him $300,000 a fight, which at the time was considered enormous. So they were willing to break the model back then, and they just seem much less willing to do it now. We shouldn't be shocked because, again, they're trying to maximize their profits as much as possible here.
Now, keeping along in that same track, a UFC Fight Pass Invitational executive says that athletes are to blame for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu still not being a proper professional sport, even went so far as to say, and I quote, "You accept to be sold for free." What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it's a little ironic, or not even really ironic, that it's a former UFC fighter, Claudia Gadelha, who was the person saying that she's the matchmaker for this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu league, or, whatever promotion the UFC is putting together. And I'm like, pot calling the kettle black there a little bit, bringing that up. It seems a complaint that you could be directing at MMA fighters. So I thought that was somewhat amusing. But I did have to question how true it is, because one thing is, she did make a good point, like, hey, you guys have these brands, you're able to build these gyms. They obviously have value. You should be asking for more. I did like that there's some sense of that, but I do have to question how much value does submission grappling have? I don't know if it's a massive spectator sport, right? So I don't know how much more they can ask, because I'm not a big fan of it. I don't know many people that are interested in watching it. The only people I know that like watching submission grappling are people who take part in submission grappling. So it doesn't seem like it has a huge audience, right? So I do question how much more could they ask for. But the other thing I had to question too is, I almost have to suspect, because the UFC seems like they're trying to roll up submission grappling, and because the UFC has so much money, TKO, their monopoly rent, and one of the things of what being a monopoly, having monopoly power gives you monopoly rent, which allows you to outspend others in certain areas. I wouldn't be shocked in some ways if they have so much money. They're like, it wouldn't cost us much to roll Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And one way we could do that, or, submission grappling, is we could offer the grapplers more than everybody else. And so have her go out there and say, you should ask for more. And look how good we are here at this promotion. Look at the largest we're giving. We're paying you much more than anybody else, not realizing that it's just a pittance of what the total revenue that the company has. And that it's a predatory tactic. That way they can roll up the talent and take them off the board so no one else can have them. I mean, I have no evidence of that, but that's a suspicion I can't help but have.
Wow. The Hollywood Reporter says that Ari Emanuel and his partner Patrick Whitesell got a combined $274 million in cash from taking Endeavor private. Now, my question is that why they took it private, so that they could create that personal windfall for themselves?
I don't think that's the reason, because they already were cashing in on the personal windfall part. I think part of it is because the stock price was struggling, that it wasn't working, and that Silver Lake is the ones that forced them to go private. And they probably went along with it because they're like, yes, this isn't working the way we pitched it. It's, I'm sure the two of them also want to make a tremendous amount of money, and they weren't making it at the price they're getting. I noticed Nate Wilcox from MMA Draw made a good point, how no one talks about the amount of money that those guys make. But I mean, he was mistaken one part. He compared it to, everybody talked about the fighter settlement and how this is only a little bit less. He misquoted the fighter settlement at $335. It's actually $375. He forgot that they actually increased it. But he's right that very few are paying attention to how much the ownership makes. And this probably shouldn't be surprising, because no one paid attention to how much the previous ownership made. We know, in fact, from the class action documents that were released. In fact, we knew this before, most of it, that the previous owners were making hundreds of millions off the UFC. In fact, over $1 billion during the lifespan that the Zuffa was owned by the Fertittas and Dana White, not including the extra several billion more after they sold it, which dwarfed the pay that went to the fighters. And that didn't get much press, even though there was evidence at the time that was happening. And so in some ways you say, I can't believe people don't pay attention to how much the management is making, profiting off the promotion, and we can have all these complaints about what the promotion's doing, but one of the reasons why they do what they do is so they can make such money. But no one seems to care. They didn't care in the past. They don't care now.
ESPN, they are removing UFC and PFL content pretty quickly after it airs. Now, I'm talking about the lower level content, your Fight Pass cards and stuff, and some on the road cards. Anyway, some of these cases it's happening in as little as just a few weeks, like every third show, it seems to be. Is that something that we need to be paying attention to as the broadcast rights deal negotiations are underway?
Probably. I'm going to note that in between every question, I am hitting mute and just hacking a lung up. So I hope I can hold it together, because that is why I'm probably biting my words, because it's just, I'm on the cusp of coughing every moment. But to get to the point here, I think I think we can take some hints from this, although it could mean two wildly different things. One is this could be a sign that the negotiations are going terrible, or that ESPN has no plans of continuing with UFC, which there seems to be some hints of that. In which case, why would they help promote and carry the UFC on their platform when it's just going to go somewhere else, right? And if they decided they're going to give up on MMA completely, well, that explains why PFL is taken off the map, right? The also possibility is they're still negotiating with both in the UFC, but they're kind of demonstrating to both of them too, is that we're not going to assist you while we're under negotiations. Let's finish the negotiations, sign, and come back, and then we'll continue to help promote your product. But if we're not going to do that, we're not going to help you at all. I think both are possibilities, but it does show that one thing is that no one is considering it a done deal that the UFC, I think, is returning to UFC. I mean, returning to ESPN. I think that's the one takeaway we can say for sure.
Joe Rogan, He said on his podcast that Dana White made the wrong play by going and, doing the power slap thing. He said that he should have gone with kickboxing. Do you think UFC could make, or Dana White could make kickboxing successful and or profitable? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!